Hello, friends, and welcome back to Silent Husband Club. We know it's been a while since our last story, and we truly appreciate your patience. From now on, we'll do our best to bring you new stories every single day. What happens when the woman you love, the one you've built your entire life with, begins to slip away into a world you no longer recognize? Would you ignore the warning signs or face the painful truth head-on, even if it shatters everything? If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. It truly helps us grow and keeps you updated. I used to believe my marriage was unshakable. For years, Claire and I built our lives brick by brick through late nights, struggles, laughter, and quiet moments that only we understood. She was my anchor, my pride, and I wore that pride openly, almost like a shield against the world. When she earned her promotion, it didn't surprise me. Claire had always been ambitious, relentless in her drive to push herself higher. I remember smiling, holding her hand as she told me about her new position. "You've earned this," I said, and I meant every word. She kissed my cheek, glowing with that light I love so much, and whispered, "I couldn't have done it without you." For a while, things felt right. She came home from work with stories about her new team, speaking with energy, her eyes alive in ways I hadn't seen in years. I listened with quiet admiration, proud that she was finding her place. But beneath that pride, a strange unease slowly began to grow, like a whisper I couldn't quite hear, a shadow I couldn't yet see. It began innocently enough. One evening, she mentioned a weekend trip with her team. A bonding retreat, she called it, at a lodge by Hudson Lake. I nodded, trying to be supportive. But when she spoke, her voice carried a hesitation I hadn't heard before. She brushed it off, claiming the group was simply more social than her old team. Still, the hesitation lingered in my mind. A week before the retreat, Claire suggested inviting some of her colleagues over. She wanted me to meet them. I agreed, thinking it was a chance to understand the people she now spent her days with. I cleaned the house, set everything in order, wanting to make a good impression. When they arrived, I expected polite professionals, maybe a little stiff. But what I found was different. They carried themselves like they owned the room, tailored suits, sharp dresses, every gesture dripping with confidence, maybe even arrogance. There were 6 of them, each impressive in their own way, but one man stood apart from the rest, Victor. Tall, perfectly dressed, his presence filled the air like a storm cloud. From the moment he shook my hand, something in me recoiled. Too firm. Too controlling. And the way he looked at Claire, it wasn't just polite attention. It was something else. Something dangerous. I tried to ignore it, to chalk it up to my imagination. But the longer the evening went on, the more I felt it tightening around me, this quiet threat, as though I was standing on ground that was slowly crumbling beneath my feet. And though I didn't know it then, that night was the beginning of everything unraveling. Victor's voice still echoed in my mind long after that evening ended. He had asked about my work, and when I told him I owned a small construction business, he smirked in that way only men who've never held a hammer in their lives can. "A man who works with his hands," he said, almost like an insult. "Hard life, no steady paycheck. Good thing your wife is climbing the ladder." His tone burned like acid. Claire tried to smooth over the tension, changing the subject quickly, but I couldn't shake the way Victor had said it. Not just the words, but the look in his eyes. He knew exactly what he was doing, testing me, pushing me, marking his territory in my own home. When the last guest left, I finally let my anger out. "That man is an arrogant bastard," I snapped. Claire sighed, placing her hand on my arm. "I know, he can be a bit much. But he's harmless, Daniel. He's well connected, and people in the company respect him." I stared at her in disbelief. That doesn't give him the right to act like a damn king in my house. She smiled softly, trying to calm me down. Please, don't make this bigger than it is. He's just used to a different world. A different world. The words cut deeper than she realized. I didn't say more, but inside me, something was beginning to crack. In the days that followed, Claire seemed distracted. She smiled less, spent more time staring at her phone, and excused herself to take calls in the other room. Each time I asked, she brushed it off. Just work, she'd say with that quick, nervous smile. But I could feel the distance growing, stretching between us like a rope pulled too tight. One morning, I watched from the window as she left earlier than usual. Instead of driving toward her office, she turned down a different street. My chest tightened. I wanted to believe there was an explanation, but doubt was already poisoning me. By the end of the week, I couldn't ignore it anymore. She was always tense, always distracted, and when she did speak, her words felt rehearsed, safe. Then one evening, as she showered, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen. A message flashed across the lock screen, and my stomach dropped. It was from Victor, looking forward to tomorrow. It's going to be a special weekend, winky face. My blood went cold. Tomorrow. The retreat at Hudson Lake Lodge. I placed the phone back quickly, forcing myself to breathe before she stepped out of the bathroom. But nothing would ever be the same. That one line had torn through my chest, leaving me hollow and shaking. Trust, the foundation I thought our marriage was built on, suddenly felt like sand slipping through my hands. That night, I lay awake beside her, listening to her steady breathing, wondering if she was already gone, if she had already chosen. And as the hours dragged by, I realized something I hadn't wanted to face. I was no longer fighting to protect my marriage. I was fighting to uncover a truth I already feared I knew. The next morning, Claire packed her bag for the retreat, moving around the bedroom with a nervous energy that made my chest ache. She avoided my eyes, speaking only when necessary, her words clipped and hollow. I asked when she would be back, and she quickly answered, late Sunday night, before brushing past me. I forced a smile, though every fiber of me screamed that something was wrong. When the door closed behind her and I heard the sound of her car pulling away, the silence in the house felt unbearable. That entire Saturday dragged like a lifetime. Her messages were sparse, shallow, just enough to prove she hadn't forgotten me, but cold enough to feel like an obligation. All good. Busy. Or, great energy here, we'll text later. But later never came. I tried to distract myself with work, with television, even with scrolling through her colleagues' social media, searching for any sign of what was happening at Hudson Lake Lodge. But it was as though the retreat existed outside the world, sealed away from anyone who didn't belong. The stillness only fed my imagination. I pictured her laughing with Victor, sitting too close, leaning into his words, and each image pierced me deeper. By Sunday morning, I couldn't take it anymore. My hand shook as I grabbed my keys, and before I could second-guess myself, I was in the car, driving the long 3 hours toward the lake. The road blurred in front of me, my thoughts loud and relentless. Was I about to ruin everything by showing up? Or was I finally about to see the truth I had been running from? The closer I got, the heavier my chest felt, as though each mile was crushing the air from my lungs. When I finally turned onto the gravel road leading to the lodge, I froze for a moment. Sleek cars lined the driveway, far more expensive than anything I could ever afford. Their polished surfaces glimmered in the fading light, like a wall of wealth reminding me I didn't belong here. My throat tightened, but I forced myself out of the car and walked toward the lodge. Laughter drifted through the open windows, the kind of laughter that feels private, intimate, the kind you share when you've forgotten the rest of the world exists. Through the glass of a large window, I saw her. Claire. She was sitting on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand, her head tilted back in laughter as Victor leaned close, whispering into her ear. Too close. Far too close. His hand rested casually on the back of the sofa, inches from her shoulder, as if the space between them already belonged to him. My fists clenched, my body shaking with a rage I could barely contain. I could have turned away. I could have walked back to my car, swallowed my pride, and lived in denial. But that's not who I was, not anymore. I stepped through the open door. The room went silent, every head turning toward me. Claire froze, the glass trembling in her hand. Her face shifted from surprise to panic in an instant. Daniel? She gasped, her voice sharp, as though afraid of the answer to her own question. Victor leaned back with a lazy smile, that smugness dripping from every word as he said, "Well, isn't this a surprise?" I looked at Claire, my voice steady though my heart thundered in my chest. "I just wanted to see how you were doing. But clearly, you're doing just fine." Her glass slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the table. "Daniel, this isn't what you think." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think." Victor stood slowly, towering, his smirk deepening. "Relax, Daniel. We're all adults here." The words were gasoline on a fire. But I didn't lash out. Not here. Not in front of them. Instead, I turned to Claire, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. "If this is nothing, then come home with me. Right now." Her eyes darted to Victor, searching for something, permission, reassurance, I couldn't tell. He only shrugged, lips curling into the faintest of grins. "It's your choice, Claire." The silence between us stretched like a chasm. And then, with trembling lips and eyes that couldn't meet mine, she spoke the words that split me open. "I can't." The room was silent. My world, however, collapsed with those two simple words. Her words sliced through me like a blade, quiet, trembling, yet final. "I can't." In that moment, every memory, every shared laugh, every promise we had once whispered in the dark seemed to crumble into dust. I stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, and realized she was already gone. The room was suffocatingly silent, the eyes of her colleagues fixed on me, some curious, some pitying, while Victor's smirk lingered like a cruel brand across my chest. I wanted to rage, to shout, to tear the smugness from his face. But instead, I found myself hollow, my voice eerily calm. "I understand," I said softly, nodding as though the words were sealing something I had no power to undo. Then I turned my back on her, on them all, and walked out. No one stopped me. Not even her. The night swallowed me as I drove aimlessly down endless roads, headlights cutting through the dark while my thoughts tore me apart. I replayed her hesitation, the way her eyes searched Victor before answering me. That single look told me more than any confession ever could. I was no longer her choice. I had already lost. My hands tightened on the wheel until my knuckles turned white. I wasn't angry at just her, I was furious with myself. How had I not seen it sooner? Every late-night call, every secretive smile at her phone, every subtle distance I tried to excuse. I had lied to myself because I couldn't bear the truth. Hours later, I pulled into an empty parking lot, killed the engine, and sat in silence. The air was thick with the smell of rain, the kind of heavy silence that presses on your chest until it hurts to breathe. My phone vibrated on the passenger seat. For a moment, I hoped it was Claire. But it wasn't. The number was unknown. I hesitated before opening it. The message was short. "I thought you should see this." Attached were two photos. The first showed Claire and Victor in a corner of the lodge, his arm lapped casually around her waist, their bodies leaning into one another as though the world outside didn't exist. The second was worse, her face tilted toward him, eyes locked, a smile so intimate it made my stomach twist. That was no harmless closeness. That was a betrayal laid bare. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding, my body trembling with fury and despair. For a long time, I couldn't move. My entire life, the future I thought I had, was collapsing right there in the glow of that tiny screen. But amidst the chaos, something inside me shifted. The hurt didn't vanish, but it hardened, crystallized into clarity. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry at her feet, pleading for scraps of loyalty she had already given away. No. If she had chosen him, then I would choose myself. With a deep breath, I started the car again and turned toward home. This time, not to wait for her excuses. This time, I would prepare for the end on my own terms. The house was silent when I returned, but it no longer felt like a home. Every corner, every object carried the weight of a lie. The couch where we had once fallen asleep together, the kitchen table where we had shared countless meals, even the bed upstairs, it all mocked me now. I sat down at the dining table, pulled out my laptop, and opened the documents that tied our lives together, the lease with both our names, the insurance policies, the joint accounts. She thought she could keep living two lives, hers with me and hers with him, but she had underestimated the one thing I still had, control over our reality. As the hours crawled by, I felt the rage transform into something sharper, colder. I drafted separation papers, reorganized accounts, and began cutting every financial tie she had to me. I wasn't doing it to hurt her. I was doing it to protect myself, to make sure I would never again be at the mercy of her choices. By the time the clock hit midnight, the decision was made. I wouldn't plead or fight for scraps of her loyalty. I would end it clean, and she would face the weight of her own betrayal. It was past 2 a.m. when I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. My chest tightened. The front door opened quietly, like she hoped to slip in unnoticed, but she froze when she saw me sitting there in the dark, waiting. Her bag dropped to the floor, her lips parting as she whispered my name. I lifted my hand sharply, cutting her off before she could spin another excuse. "Sit down." She obeyed, lowering herself onto the chair across from me, eyes darting nervously. I placed my phone on the table between us, the screen glowing with the photo of her and Victor, his arm around her, her smile betraying everything. My voice was calm, almost too calm. "Do you want to explain this?" Her breath hitched, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered, but I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. "Not what it looks like. Claire, I'm not blind. I know what I'm looking at." She tried again, voice trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I cut her off, leaning forward, my words cold as steel." "But you did. Every lie, every excuse, every time you told me not to worry, you hurt me. And now, I won't let you hurt me again." I slid a folder across the table. Inside were the documents, everything already set in motion. "This is the end. You'll move out. You'll take nothing but what's yours. I won't fight you, and I won't beg. You made your choice, Claire. Now you'll live with it." Her eyes filled with tears as she shook her head, whispering my name like a plea, but I stood up, pocketed my keys, and walked out. I left her there, surrounded by the ruins of her own decisions, because there was nothing left for me to say. Out in the night, I breathed in the cold air, and for the first time in weeks, my chest felt lighter. The morning after felt strangely quiet. I returned home to find Claire already gone, her belongings packed into boxes, her perfume lingering faintly in the air like the ghost of a life that no longer belonged to me. No shouting, no fight, no desperate last words, just silence. She had made her choice at Hudson Lake, and I had made mine at the kitchen table. What remained was the hollow space between us, a void that could never be bridged again. In the days that followed, I expected the weight of grief to crush me. I expected the anger to boil endlessly, the loneliness to consume me. But instead, I felt a strange calm, almost like standing in the eye of a storm. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe without the gnawing suspicion, without watching her eyes flicker toward a phone she wouldn't let me see. I went through the motions of reclaiming my life, closing accounts, changing locks, cleaning the house one drawer at a time. Each step was like peeling away her shadow from my home, and with each step, I felt a little freer. Still, the nights were heavy. Lying in bed alone, staring at the ceiling, I would think back to the life we had built and wonder how it had all come to this. The truth was simple: she had chosen a different world, and I had chosen myself. No explanation, no apology, could ever change that. And yet, beneath the bitterness, there was something unexpected, a faint flicker of hope. Not for us, not anymore, but for me. Weeks later, I found myself in a small bar downtown, meeting an old friend for a drink. The laughter came easier that night, the conversations lighter, as though a weight had finally lifted. At one point, I walked to the bar to order another round, and that's when I noticed her. A woman sitting alone at the far end, calm, self-assured, her presence quiet but undeniable. Our eyes met, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel the sting of betrayal or the ache of loss. I simply felt curious. She smiled, and I surprised myself by smiling back. I didn't know if it would lead anywhere. Maybe it was nothing, maybe it was everything. But in that moment, I realized something vital: my life hadn't ended at Hudson Lake Lodge. It had only changed. Claire's betrayal didn't define me, and Victor's smug victory didn't destroy me. I was still standing. Still breathing. And for the first time in a long while, I was ready to move forward on my terms, at my pace. The past had closed its doors, and before me lay a future unwritten. And as I left the bar that night with a lighter step than I had in months, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I had lost her, but I had found myself again.
Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, shocked you, or simply made you think, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment, your thoughts, your story, your truth. Subscribe for more raw, real, and unforgettable confessions. And if this story made you feel seen, share it. Someone else might need to hear it too. You're not alone here. This channel is a safe space for those who've been betrayed, broken, and rebuilt.